The newest Horus Heresy book, Dropsite Massacre, just came out, and holy cow, it changes everything, guys. I'm seeing people talk about the story, the tragedy, and the horror of it all. But no one, absolutely no one, is talking about the real thing that matters. Powerscaling. Because let me tell you folks, what happens in this book flips the Primarch power rankings upside down.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
This video was totally spontaneous. I wasn't planning to cover this book yet, but once I heard Horus and Angron actually fought and saw who came out on top, I knew I had to jump on this immediately. The results are simply insane. So of course, your favorite fallen cow had to make a video about it. I'm gonna break down the Dropsite Massacre, what went down, what it means for the lore, and how this one book rewrote the power rankings of the Emperor's degenerate sons. Oh boy, here we go again. Let's jump straight into the Primarch cow hole. It's time to Powerscale. So before we nosedive into Powerscaling insanity, let's briefly cover what the Dropsite Massacre is actually about. Obviously, it's centered around the infamous Istvan V massacre, where the Raven Guard, Iron Hands, and Salamanders got absolutely obliterated by their former allies, the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Word Bearers, and Alpha Legion, who were allied with the already traitorous legions, the Sons of Horus, Death Guard, Emperor's Children, and World Eaters. But this book gives us way more than just the usual retelling. It fleshes out the build-up, the strategy, and the personalities behind the betrayal. We see Horus Menace becoming the de facto War Master of the Loyalists, and for once, he's actually kind of an interesting character. Of course, he still ends up losing his head, but for the first time, Horus actually comes across as cool. So thank you, John French, for giving my man some respect before being decapitated. We also get Angron raging about how the traitors didn't fight fair and honorable, which is some great characterization for the angry Ron. And Corax gets some solid focus as well, showing why he's one of the most competent Primarchs in the whole mess. And chief among all of them is Horus. Horus is perfectly portrayed. He's obviously evil, but he's still kind of similar to Horus in the Great Crusade, and has not yet become the monster he would later become in the series. He's charismatic, logical, pragmatic, and above all, ruthless. Overall, it's the Dropsite Massacre we all know and love, just with way more depth, character focus, and brutal emotion. There are a few rough spots, I will admit. I wasn't the biggest fan of Karn the Betrayer's portrayal in this book. I was hoping for something similar to Betrayer, but hey, not every page can be a winner, and the rest of the book more than makes up for it. But we're not here to give a book review, fellas. We're here to talk about the Powerscaling, specifically Primarch Powerscaling. Why, you may ask? Well, in this book, the Primarchs get a lot of love, especially Corax, Angron, slightly Vulcan, and most importantly, and kind of the reason I am making this video, Horus LuperCOW. Before we dive into Horus's insane new feats, the one that completely changes what we thought about the Primarch's power levels, let's take a step back and talk about how powerful Horus was before this book came out. Horus the Heresy, the man with all 40,000 Warhammers and the big bad of 30K. He tore the galaxy in half and basically made the Imperium the way it is in the current setting. You'd think this guy would have insane feats right out of the gate. Stuff like beating other Primarchs and casually taking down massive Xenos monstrosities. Well, no, not really. And unfortunately, guys, I'm not kidding. Mr. Horus LuperCOW, the Balding Menace, has pretty much no feats until the books Wolfsbane, Slaves to Darkness, and the later Siege of Terra books, but outside of that, he has a few feats sprinkled in throughout the Heresy, but not a lot to really work with. For example, base Horus has literally no feats at all and is purely all hype. And since I'm talking about Horus's forms, let's go through them. For those new to the channel, in my cow-sized opinion, Horus LuperCOW has 5 distinct forms or evolutions, if you will, as he grows more corrupted and powerful throughout the Horus Heresy series. It's kind of like Pokemon, but with way more murder and daddy issues. These forms go chronologically: Great Crusade, or base Horus LuperCOW, which is him during the peak of the Great Crusade before falling to chaos. His second form is post-Davin Horus, which is him after being wounded and falling to the ruinous powers on Davin. Third is post-Molech Horus, who has just gained a massive amp by entering the warp gate on Molech and being gifted the powers of all 4 chaos gods. Mind you, by doing this, Horus fractured his soul, leaving a portion of himself behind in the warp. Fourth is Slaves to Darkness Horus. We see this form of Horus towards the end of the book Slaves to Darkness, after Malachurst has sacrificed himself to rejoin Horus's soul together. And with his soul complete, his full power finally emerges. He is capable of ragdolling Primarchs and is clearly a direct challenger to the Emperor himself. And finally, we have God Emperor Horus, as seen during the Siege of Terra, specifically the End in the Death. He is an absolute monster and one of the strongest beings in Warhammer 40K history and arguably fiction itself. But back to my original point before I started being autistic. We're talking about base Horus, before all the warp juice and chaos buffs, and the fact that he doesn't actually have that many feats. Sure, he's talked up as one of the best warriors among the Primarchs, nearly unbeatable in combat, but the actual evidence is kind of thin. He does have a few notable showings in the Wolf of Ash and Fire. He slices through Primarch-sized orcs like it's nothing, and even tanks plasma shots that vaporize Space Marines. In Horus Rising, he fights a Nurgle-possessed governor who wields an anathema, a cursed blade that mortally wounds him. Just in general, Horus LuperCOW throughout the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy has plenty of statements from other Primarchs and other characters, hyping him up as one of the strongest Primarchs in the 30k setting, at least in his base form. But then again, we've also got a bunch of counter statements. For example, in Deliverance Lost, Corax reflects, physically, Horus and Corax had proved an even match for each other in their mock duels and wrestling bouts. Such sparring had not created any greater bond between them as it had done with the other Primarchs, but Corax had never considered the possibility that one day he might have to test his worth against Horus for real. So even there, we see that base Horus isn't portrayed as miles above his brothers. He's exceptional, sure, but not some unstoppable god yet. And for those who bring up the Anathema incident, that's not really an anti-feat. The weapon is basically a warp-infused heat-seeking missile. It's specifically designed to kill its chosen target. And once it's marked you, your plot armor doesn't mean diddly squat. So no, Horus getting stabbed by the Anathema doesn't mean he's weak. It means he got hit by a cheat-coded weapon that literally had his name on it. With these statements laid out, you notice an interesting pattern. That Horus really might just not be that strong. And if I had to rank him, I would put him near the back of the mid-tier Primarchs, probably relative to Corvus Corax. To put it frankly, I think Corax probably edges out the Balding Menace thanks to his warp-enhanced abilities and stealth-based combat style. I mean, Corax has the ability to literally disappear. So following that logic, I figured post-Davin Horus, after his corruption began, was only slightly stronger than his base form. As what we've seen previous in the lore, a Chaos buff would only give you slight physical enhancements. But I guess you could also make the argument, since Horus is the crown prince and war master of the Chaos forces, that his corruption buff would be a lot stronger. But my rebuttal to that would be we just don't see him do much in this post-Davin form.
You're not making any sense at all.
I've discussed this in a prior video. I basically thought he was a top 10 Primarch. But definitely not over the heavy hitters like Sanguinius, Magnus, Fulgrim, Kurz, the Lion, or Angron. It all made sense. At least it used to. The facts supported it. If Horus and Corax were evenly matched in sparring, and Corax himself admitted Angron would stomp him in a straight-up fight, then by default, Horus should be below Angron at this stage, even with the Chaos Amp from Davin. And Corax even spells this out in Raven's Flight. Corax flexed his grip on his whip as he watched the World Eater's Primarch stalking forward. He knew this was the end. He had barely 3,000 Space Marines against the might of a whole legion. he would have to face Angron, and he knew he would fall to the World Eater. There was not another Primarch that could best him in single combat, save perhaps Horus and maybe Sanguinius. Corax was an immortal lord of battle, but Angron was war incarnate. Now yes, I know what you're thinking. Wait, cow, Corax just said Horus might be able to beat him. Doesn't that contradict everything you just said? And yeah, it kinda does. Welcome to Games Workshop writing, where consistency is an optional upgrade. But I included this quote for a reason. It highlights how inconsistent Horus's scaling has been across the series. I love Games Workshop, but come on guys, you can't give me Horus is equal to Corax in one book and Horus could maybe beat him in another, and expect me not to go insane trying to make sense of all of it. Still, Corax states perhaps, which makes it sound 50-50, which tracks with the previous statement in Deliverance Lost. It also fits better with how Horus was shown early on. A competent warrior, yes, but his real power came with his charisma, leadership, and strategy, not physical dominance. He was a solid, mid-tier Primarch, but not the strongest, as his reputation suggested. And then Dropsite Massacre came out and decided to slap all of that straight into the warp. Everything I thought I knew about Horus's place in the hierarchy is gone, because what happens in this book completely shatters the established order. And with that, let's jump into the new Dropsite Massacre book and talk about the new Primarch feats that are presented in this novel. Hold on to your pants, people, it's gonna get a little bumpy. In this book, Corax, Angron, Vulcan, and Horus all get some combat spotlights that either enhance them or give them slight nerfs. Corax, Angron, and Vulcan are seen cutting through Marines like ragdolls, but in this book, the big power scaling spotlight is on 2 Primarch fights, which is kinda 1.5 to be honest, but we'll go with 2. One with Mortarion and Vulcan, and the bigger one between Angron and Horus. I'll briefly cover my bases just to make sure I'm not missing anything, so let's chat Morty and Vulcan for 1 second. They have a very brief fight. A blur in the fog. Mortarion twists, a hand grips the haft of his scythe and stops it dead. Orisis looks up. It is Vulcan. The 2 Primarchs are eye to eye, close enough to embrace. The hammer and the scythe of each are locked together. Vulcan twists free and strikes. The hammer blow lands with force enough to crush mountains and shatter tanks. But the Death Lord is standing, twisting the scythe into a cut that thrums the air like a rotor blade. Scythe strikes Hammerhead once, twice, and a 3rd time. The 2 Primarch brothers are still locked together, movements too fast to read or follow. Oriasis hears a rotor cannon open up nearby, hears the rallying shouts pass from mouth to mouth and vox to vox as Vulcan's honor company pours to meet the Death Guard. Sons of Vulcan stand. So what can we actually gather from this? Absolutely nothing. The fight has no visible conclusion, no outcome, and no clear winner. It's a 10-second clash of titans that fades back into the fog. We already know Mortarion is durable as hell, so him tanking a blow from Vulcan isn't that surprising. And the same goes for Vulcan, who can snatch silence out of the air and stop it dead in its tracks. Which isn't unexpected because Vulcan is the physically strongest Primarch. And then Orias, who is spectating the fight, remarks that he can't track their movements. This statement also tracks from what we've seen in the past, as Space Marines typically can't keep up with the Primarch's movements. But in terms of who's stronger than who, it's impossible to pick a clear verdict. So we're leaving Vulcan vs Mortarion exactly where it is, a stalemate with 0 usable data. But the Horus vs Angron duel, yeah, that's a lot more eye-opening. Here's another excerpt from the Dropsite Massacre. Karn has lived his life in war. He knows that an Astartes legionary at war is beyond most humans' ability to process. You can see it in their eyes, transhuman dread some call it. The knowledge that you're in the presence of something that can end you instantly. Karn has seen it. He has even tried to understand it. He has always failed. But in the instant, when Angron and Horus meet, Karn sees and thinks he might now understand. Chain teeth shrieking, blows, shivering sparks from weapons and armor, fast beyond fast, fury beyond fury, Horus coming forward, always forward, striking again and again, and Angron striking back from every angle. Axe heads hooking Horus's mace, pulling it down, searching for an opening. Horus's mace swings down. Angron brings both axes up. The spinning chains catch the haft of Worldbreaker. The teeth bite the adamantium haft. Horus steps back. Angron is snarling, eyes wide. He lashes a kick out. His foot hits Horus in the chest. The red eye on the War Master's breastplate shatters. Chunks of red crystal fall. Angron roars and swings. Horus catches the blow with the mace's haft, turns it, and rams the head into Angron. Armor cracks. Angron catches his balance. Axe is raised. Horus holds still. The War Master's jaw is set, and Angron bellows. It is a sound of pain as much as rage. He cuts. Karn feels his Primarch blows as much as he sees them. He knows them. They are the death blows of the axe fighters on New Syria. The cuts made by a warrior who will die and take his opponent with him. Angron's axe blows do not land. Horus has let go of Worldbreaker. The great mace falls. Horus catches the haft of Angron's first axe. Then the claws of his other hand slash down. Karn had not seen the blades unfold. They slice at the chain binding the axe to Angron's wrist as Horus twists the weapon free from his brother's grip and slices it back at Angron. Its chain blade meets that of the second blade. Teeth jam into each other. Chain drive shriek. Worldbreaker hits the floor. A stalemate, but not really. A demonstration that Horus could have ended the fight already, could have ended it with a death stroke, but instead had chosen to take Angron's own blade. Horus leans in towards Angron, looking through the locked weapon. What is your choice, brother? There you have it, Angron vs Horus in the new Dropsite Massacre book. The duel isn't the longest, but the fight outcome is pretty easy to interpret. Horus straight up beat Angron in this fight. Which is even more insane because Angron is clearly trying to kill Horus while Horus is holding back completely, not wanting to hurt one of his Primarch allies. And to really drive this fight home, the book even states, a stalemate, but not really. A demonstration that Horus could have ended the fight already, could have ended it with a death stroke, but instead has chosen to take Angron's own blade. And remember who we're talking about here. Angron, the same guy who defeated Leman Russ during the Night of the Wolf, nearly killed Guilliman in Betrayer before his ascension interrupted the duel, and has consistently been described across the series as one of the physically strongest and most ferocious Primarchs in existence. Now I know some Space Wolf fans are already typing essays about how Russ was proving a point in their duel, and yeah, sure he was. But that doesn't change the fact that Angron won the duel straight up. As Angron himself says in the book Betrayer, I had him, Lorgar, my boot on his throat, at the very end. I stood above him at last. So yeah, Angron straight up defeated Russ. He would have been killed by the encircling Space Wolves afterwards, but the duel itself, that was Angron's win. End of story. And this is the same Angron who's easily a top 5 Primarch in raw combat ability. Wow, fellows, wow.
Wow.
You know what's funny is this is where my mind went after I read that Horus defeated Angron. Damn, I've really rewired my brain to be autistically power scaling at all times. Jesus Christ. Okay, but back to Horus. It's now time to go over why this duel was so important and the effect it has on Primarch power scaling in general. So like I stated earlier, Horus at the time of his fight with Angron is in his post-Davin form. And before this book came out, I thought this version of Horus was not that strong, as I thought this form of Horus only received a minor chaos buff. You know, the usual enhancements, speed, strength, and other physical factors. My reasoning for this came from the book Vengeful Spirit, where he has 2 notable feats that support this theory. First, he jumps like a Marvel hero onto a raptor while wielding both Worldbreaker and Silence, and destroys it, which is pretty impressive. Then later he bullies 4 knights of House Divine. For context, a knight is a towering bipedal war engine capable of crushing hundreds of space marines, dozens of tanks, and shrugging off powerful energy attacks. They're even deadlier in groups, hunting in coordinated packs. And here we have Horus facing 4 of them at once. Yet Horus maneuvers through them, crippling multiple knights while taking hits, dodging fire, and systematically dismantling their mechs. I know for a damn fact that some of you are very confused right now. What are you talking about, Cow? Post-Davin Horus has already shown off some incredible feats. Well, my answer to that is not really, fellas. Jumping onto a raptor and destroying it and taking on 4 knights at once are impressive, but they are comparable to other base Primarch feats. such as Sanguinius taking down Warhound Titans, Fulgrim destroying the Avatar Arcane, and Magnus tossing around Eldar War Titans. So you can kinda understand my reasoning when I was like, okay, post-Davin Horus, minor, tiny chaos buff, he's able to destroy knights, he can jump really high, seems to have a lot of physical strength, nothing else really besides that, so I think my prior ranking with him outside of the top 10 was a pretty fair decision. But oh boy, oh my, I was very, very wrong. Forcing me to have, yes, emphasis on have, to make a Powerscaling video update, which is this installment. I hope I haven't gotten a little too sidetracked in this video. I feel like I've been all over the place, and I hope you guys are not as confused as I am. So with this new lore update, post-Davin Horus with this Davin buff easily belongs in the top 3 physically strongest Primarchs. There are 2 ways to look at this. One, base Horus may have always been stronger than we thought, which would simultaneously boost Korax's relative power. Or 2, base Horus was never that strong to begin with, and the Davin buff was just that insane. Meaning that the post-Davin buff makes him one of the most physically strong Primarchs right from the start. Given his existing feats and his relative standing to Corvus Corax, I lean towards the idea that Davin gave him an insane buff. Corax is already one of the best duelist Primarchs as seen when he dominates Lorgar and First Heretic. He even states of Kurz that Corax knew himself to be numbered among the best fighters in the service of the Emperor, and he had never considered Kurz his equal. Yet, Corax admits he's below Angron. This creates a strange triangle. Angron loses to Horus, Horus is equal to Corax, and Corax would lose to Angron, which puts us in a very weird spot indeed. If Corax is below Angron and Horus is equal to him, we can safely conclude that Horus received an obscene physical buff, which ultimately brings us to the question, how goddamn powerful is a chaos buff, especially on a Primarch? A great comparison might be Fulgrim in his post-possession form in the book Reflection Cracked. He's free of the demon, but still corrupted by the ruinous powers. Look, said Lucius, he's healing. You have to keep up the pressure. Fabius transferred his gaze from Fulgrim's face to his healing foot with academic interest. The battle captains took up positions either side of Fulgrim and turned their devices upon the bound Primarch. Lucius smelled Fulgrim's blood and longed to take up the owl and hammer, but the look in the Primarch's eyes stayed his hand. The tortures inflicted by Caesron and the other captains would have reduced a mortal to frothing madness, but Fulgrim appeared to be enjoying the experience. From this, we can gather just how powerful a chaos-corrupted Primarch is. Similar to Horus, Fulgrim has been physically enhanced, his speed and strength have grown, as well as his regeneration, as the Emperor's children constantly torture him, burning and stripping away his flesh, but the damage is immediately reversed. We can only assume that Horus has this same ability, easily showing why he is one of the strongest Primarchs at this time. Furthermore, Fulgrim in the Reflection Cracked is shown to have awakened psychic abilities. So powerful in fact that he is able to effortlessly crush a Warlord Titan with his mind. Now we don't know if Horus has gained this power as well, but even if he did, he does not show any affinity for Psyker abilities until after his post-Molech form. It's reasonable to assume that any of the Primarchs that are corrupted by Chaos would have these abilities, which essentially means that Chaos buffs on Primarchs are fucking broken as hell. So with this new knowledge on Chaos buffs, Horus's defeat of Angron, and the abilities we see from post-possession Fulgrim in the book The Reflection Cracked, we can place post-Davin Horus at either 2 or 3 in the overall Primarch rankings. Base Magnus is probably still undisputably number 1. He is simply the ultimate psychic powerhouse, but after him, the rankings become murky. It's probably either Horus or Sanguinius at 2, though it is quite tricky. Base Sanguinius easily defeats Kabanda and Chris, 2 greater demons, which is no small feat. But Horus, on the other hand, literally straight up defeats Angron, who is one of the strongest Primarchs in the 30k setting. If I really had to pick one over the other with a gun to my head, I would say that Horus post-Davin is stronger than Sanguinius in his base form. And if we're going off chronological order, like powerscaling all the Primarchs at the time of the Dropsite Massacre, Horus post-Davin is probably the strongest. I know I said base Magnus would probably beat him, but that's base Magnus. At the time of the Dropsite Massacre, Prospero has already been reduced to cinders, and that means Leman Russ has already baned Magnus the Red, shattering his soul, reducing him to a very weakened form of himself. Honestly, I don't think Magnus ever returns to 100% power after this moment, because one of his shards is forever lost as it is tied to Janus, the Grand Master of the Grey Knights. Kind of a little autistic spiral. You could make the argument that base Magnus the Red is still the strongest Primarch that has ever existed and will ever exist, since Demon Primarch Magnus is still without that one piece of his soul that base Magnus had. That may be really autistic power scaling, but I really think base Magnus could probably beat all the Demon Primarchs quite easily, I'm not gonna lie. But that is besides the point. Yes, at this moment during the Dropsite Massacre, Magnus the Red is shattered. He only has one shard of himself left. If we're power scaling at the Dropsite Massacre at Istvan 5, he is one of the weaker Primarchs, leaving post-Davin Horus the undisputed number 1 if we put him over Sanguinius, which in this case I think Horus prevails in his post-Davin form over base Sanguinius. Holy shit, that was a little autistic. Alright, let me summarize all of the pure nonsense I've been sprouting out of my cow brain. First, base Horus is probably still a mid-tier Primarch, likely on par with or slightly weaker than Corvus Corax. 2. Post-Davin Horus is one of the strongest Primarchs at the time of the Istvan Dropsite Massacre. By the time he reaches his next evolution, post-Molech Horus, he likely rivals base Magnus or sits just slightly below him. Enslaves to Darkness Horus and eventually God Emperor Horus are easily the strongest Primarch by a wide, fat-sized margin. Thirdly, a Chaos buff, whether from a single Ruinous God or a full Pantheon, are obscene buffs. Physically, psychically, or both, they grant massive amps to anyone receiving them. But anyway, I had way too much autistic fun digging into all of this nonsensical power scaling. And it's only gonna get worse, guys. Because in a follow-up video, I've decided to rank every single Primarch at the time of the Dropsite Massacre. So that's Fulgrim with the Lair Blade to Horus with his new post-Davin buffs. And yes, I know I keep saying the Chaos Warbands video is coming, and it really is, guys. But first off, I have to finish the script, and that may take a second. I promise there's a method to my madness. So here's the plan for the rest of the month of November. The next video will cover the Phoenix Lords and their power level, then we'll do the Chaos Warbands. Then I'm officially launching the new Duel series, where we'll put characters head-to-head in lore-accurate 1v1s, starting with Leman Russ and Jagatai Khan, both in base form. And finally, the grand finale of this month, ranking every single Space Marine in all of 40k to finally crown who is the strongest of them all. It's gonna be a very ambitious month, and it's probably going to drive me insane, but damn it, we're gonna do it anyways. If you want to support the madness and help keep this channel from collapsing under the weight of caffeine, autism, and lore spreadsheets, then consider checking out my Patreon or YouTube memberships. Shout out the cool cows we already have there. Ryania Basket, Ritter S, Keydree, Impossible, William Strong, and Nico149. You guys are some pretty damn cool cows. You're definitely drinking the right type of milk. For those thinking about joining, you'll get exclusive polls, your say in future projects, and more dumb cow-themed nonsense. Alright herd, that about wraps up this video. Stay milked, stay heretical, and I'll see you in the next video.